I hope everyone's well. So I'm just going to pull some cards out in a minute and see what they say. And this video really is, well, first of all, if you've not been to my channel before, I'm on a divine love path, and my videos are about for people, other people that have incarnated for that same reason. So if you're watching this, then that's why you're watching it. So that's why you've been guided to it. And I really want to talk about the full moon that we just had as well, and what that's been for. So, in fact, I might just talk about that quickly first. So, as with every full moon, the moon, when it's in that phase, when it's full, it's about shining a light on what we need to come into awareness of inside us that needs to be healed and released. And this full moon was really powerful. I feel actually personally that it was the most powerful moon that we've had for a really long time, and very subtly powerful. So we've had a lot of over the past year or so, few years, we've had a lot of upgrades with the moons, and with the moon cycles, with the full moons, and a lot of them have been quite kind of dramatic and chaotic, and kind of how can I say it? I think a bit unnerving, and a bit what's that word? Cause I can't even say it. Can't say. Can't say the word. What is it? It's catastrophe. Catastrophe. That's it. Catastrophizing. So it's been like your emotions build up to a full moon. I feel like a lot of the moons that we've had have been really kind of, that as they've built up, we've started feeling really like maybe a bit panicky and a bit like stressed and worried and a bit like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And this kind of feeling, right? But this one was much more subtle. So as we've had those moons where that feeling built up, right, and it was all like, oh my God, something's coming, it's like, and they're going to, a bit crazy. They, after those passed away, right, it's like, as every time one of those moons passed away, the momentum energetically has been building and building and building, and it's like those moons seem to build the momentum of the fast moving energy that we're in now. And what it seems to be now is that, because we're in very fast moving energy all the time, so it's almost like that catastrophizing energy that came with those moons has now kind of merged into the general energy. So it's like a momentum. It's like now we're on, we're moving, and we're like, everything's coming in fast, like events coming into our lives, many events. You've got to let go of that relationship. You've got to let go of that job. You've got to move to this location, that kind of thing. It's all like, it's like coming in like that, right? Because it was brought in with the those moons getting us ready for that kind of momentum, and now we're in that momentum. But it feels like this moon that we've just had just stopped us, right? It's like a pause, and it's like, right, here we go. And very subtly, that moon, which is a shadow moon, because it's in Libra, so it means that we are dealing with shadow work, faced us with our ultimate wound. And that's the shadow work, right? Facing your ultimate wound. And it's like a pause in the momentum, and it brings that up. And it's coming in differently, right? Because every time we go through a moon, we're brought our wounds to face. And it's like, here's your wounds. How are you going to operate around your wounding, right? Every time you have a moon comes up, it's like, how are you going to relate to your own wounding? So it's like, are you going to let yourself become that wounding and become completely absorbed by it and live it as though it is you, right? And it's the most important thing. or about you. So we've been through all that, right? With the past moons, that were the catastrophizing moons, with the the drama and the crisis moons, if you want to call them that as well, kind of crisis moments. And this one I feel was like, not here's your wounding, but here's your wound, like your one wound, your major wound, and how are you going to be in relation to this wound now? And it's asked as a big question, this moon, because we've done so much work with these past moons, right? With the catastrophizing, I can say it now, thank you, and the crisis and the drama, right, of who we are in relation to our wounds. That we've done so much work with that, and a lot of that is unconscious work as well, because we don't always know we're doing it. We just know that we're like going crazy with the moon, right? Sometimes we don't even know that. We just know we're going crazy, and we're feeling like dishevelled and dramatised and, purging or whatever. But with this one, it's very calmly asking us, how deep can you go? And by deep, that means not like how much are you going to like wallow in it and wallow in any self-pity or become dramatic around it, like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, that kind of drama, or oh my God, I can't live here anymore, It's like, how are you going to be in relation to this wound, and how balanced can you be? Libra, the balance, right? The scales. How balanced can you remain in the face of this wound coming up yet again? And that's really what's been asking us. So it's been a big one in terms of like, how are you going to let yourself be triggered? Because your wound, right, so that just go back as well, all these moons that come in with all this wounding and everything, a lot of that wounding is around other people. It's like what's been done to you in this lifetime and how you've reacted in the past, and replaying situations out in your head again about how you did that, how you reacted to that person and what you said, and how you felt when they did that to you, and how why did you let them do that to you, and all this kind of stuff, right? Or that triggering that you have to go through again at the moon, and like in relation to your wounding. But of course, the biggest wound of all, the most ultimate wound of all that you have to face is your own triggering, right? And that your own triggering is always about shame and embarrassment, and your own place in the world in relation to that. So the loss of hope, right? The loss of elaborate on this a bit more. It's like a loss of self, right? When you feel shame and you feel embarrassment about you, right? Being in the world, like, because that's really what it comes down to, shame and embarrassment. It's like, and ultimately, like, do I have a right to be here? Because, I'm unworthy of being here, because I feel so shamed and embarrassed about myself that, it's like questioning your very existence. The reason for this, by the way, for this wound being the ultimate wound, is because when you're here, right, when you incarnate, like I said at the beginning of the the videos that I do for people that are on a divine path, right? So divine path means that you're opening up to the heart, so you're existing only from the heart. So you're existing only from a state of going with the flow and following your own heart. Right, and this state of going with the flow and following your own heart is the closest that you can get to a spiritual existence in human form. Because the closest that you're going to get to your soul self in human form is your emotional self, right? The closest that you can get of a energetic or vibrational dimensional way is your emotions. That's the closest you are in human form to that, right? To higher energy and higher vibration is your emotional state. So either it's negative or it's positive, right? Masculine, feminine. Positive is the feminine. So when you're on a divine path, your whole path is about this, embodying what comes from your heart, right? And absolutely absolving yourself of any kind of blame, which takes away any shame or any embarrassment that could possibly be. So it's releasing completely your shadow side, right, in that divine path. because shadow side is negative, shadow side is karmic, shadow side is masculine, blah, 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 right? So you're moving into a completely highly organized, highly energetic feminine state. You can't let go of the masculine completely, but all you're doing is you're bringing it into balance so that you are of a higher feminine state, right? Because that incorporates a thriving, healthy, masculine ego within it. So that's the path of the heart, that's the divine path. So the reason for us facing all the wounding that we've been through with all the moons and all the drama and all the crisis is to release any kind of triggering wounding, right, to enable us to follow the heart, come into the heart. But then this ultimate wound, which is a self wound, right, which is the shame and embarrassment and the reason for being, okay, when you're facing that ultimately and you're doing that shadow work, what you're doing is you are releasing all negativity, right, all negativity. And the kind of like, you've got that process, right, that goes on where you're releasing all that through facing that one wound. And what's being asked of you when the wound comes up, it's like the wound's coming up, right? It's like it's got its little horns on and it's facing you, right? And it's saying, how are you going to be in relation to me, right? So how are you going to be in relation to this wounding? And when you're finally mastering that wound and it comes up, you're no longer going into drama or crisis or catastrophizing. What you're doing is you're literally seeing the wound and you're mastering it. So you are no longer becoming the wound, right? The Libra, right? The Libra, the shadow, the balance. So you are remaining calm and balanced in relation to your own wound, and you are not becoming that wound. You are simply seeing it there and knowing that it was, well, the mastery, see, is knowing that you are not that wound anymore. And that means it's not hooking you into triggering you, into taking you into a negative state, into having control of you through a negative vibration. Because you're seeing it, you're acknowledging it, but you're not becoming it, and you're remaining calm and balanced and in a highly positive feminine state where you're still able to create and you're still able to thrive and function optimally in a human form within the matrix, which is a fear-driven matrix, which would have you pulled down by hooking you into negativity. So there's that going on, right? And that's this thing about the last wound coming up, that this is soul work, that we're doing this with this wound, because everything is soul work. When you're on a divine path like this, everything is about coming into the heart. So once you are coming into this modus operandus around your ultimate wound and mastering it, it means that you're no longer held back by anything that is of a negative value. The other thing that's kind of, because that's one process, right? And like I say, it's a soul process. It's an upgrading and up-leveling into your soul being in human form. So that's what's overlying that whole process, right? So you've got that, which you could probably witness from a human perspective, right? It's quite, because a lot of this is, you would get, sorry, let me have a sip of my coffee. A lot of this stuff you would get possibly even in like psychoanalysis, I can't speak today, can I? Or psychology and that kind of stuff, where they talk about wounding and facing your wounds and all that kind of stuff. And that's you can do that from a human perspective. However, what they don't talk about in all those kinds of mind-based therapies and stuff is a soul perspective. Well, at least I don't think they do. If they do, sorry, but I didn't know that. Okay, so overlying all of that, right, is a soul meaning, if you like, to it. Because also when you face that final wound and these things don't bother you anymore and you don't get hooked in by your own shame and embarrassment, you don't let that become you, right? So you're not becoming ashamed or embarrassed and you're not dropping into a negative vibration. What you're actually doing there is you are you are coming on, you're allowing yourself to be on your path, your divine path, right? Because you're staying in the heart. And, you know, the first point of ultimate love, like complete love, it's got to be for you. So there's that going on, which is like kind of upgrading you and enabling you to be on your path and to proceed on your path, like further along it, the divine love path, divine existence path. But also what it's doing is it's taking you away from self, because the self is a construct and the self is transitory. So that is the self, that is your persona, your name, your personality. And that is only, you know, you only have that for a bare minimum of, you know, this lifetime. And then that gets left behind. So you're only in this persona for, you know, to learn lessons and to really evolve past that persona, because ultimately embodying your soul in a human framework, right, in a human being, is to let go of that persona completely and transcend it, because that's what that is what is moving into the soul really is transcending your human persona and all the pain that comes along with it. So all the wounding from the past, and then the final wound of being you, right? The final wound of being you and feeling like you don't have a right to exist, because that's what comes with pain, with shame and embarrassment, is feeling you don't have a right to exist. I am not worthy. So in letting go of that final wound, or facing that final wound and acknowledging that it is not you, you then gain control and mastery over it. You absolve yourself of it. You transcend self, so you move even further onto your soul path. So that's been going on with this moon as well. So it's been a really big moon in terms of like what it's offered as an opportunity for advancement of the soul in a human framework, right? Because that's if you're on a divine path, that's what you're here for. You're here to advance into your soul essence, if you want to call it that, your soul being, your I am presence. You're here to evolve into that in your human lifetime, in your present persona. So, and again, you've got duality there as well, you see, because you've got your persona, you've got who you exist as, you know, whatever your name is, whatever you do for a living, you know, whatever your parents do, whatever social class, social status, all those kinds of things, what designer labels you wear, what kind of car you drive, that define you in an egotistical human way. And then you've got your soul self, which is you're here for a divine work of opening up into the heart and moving beyond all those constructs into pure heart energy, where none of those things matter anymore, and you live from the heart and you follow the heart, right? So again, you've got the duality there as well. So that's what the moon's been about. So it's been a big one, right, in facing that. But every time we go through a moon, like I say, we move from the crisis points, and we're now going through what is points of more stability with the moons. And I said before, didn't I, about the moon phases changing. So we're being asked to work more. Like I said last time, it's release at both moons. It's like being asked to work more at both moons, basically. Because with the moons, it always comes work. It's like before the moons, you're moving along, you've got all the mini events coming in, you're dealing with things in the physical world a lot of the time, you know, and then it'll be like, stop. Now you need to look at yourself again, right? Now you need to look within again. What can you find there that you haven't dealt with? And there's not much there left to deal with, because we've been doing all that wound clearing for a long time. So it's like your one ultimate wound. All right, so let's pull a few cards, see what they say is coming up now, post-moon. All right. Are you going to let me drink coffee and do the cards? Some people would say you shouldn't be doing that, but then that's fear-driven, isn't it? Let's see. You can do whatever you want. Right. some cards for the new moon debriefing for those on divine path. Sorry, full moon debriefing. Right, we've got Ace of Swords coming out, Queen of Cups, Five of Wands, Death, King of Swords, Devil, Six of Swords. I always feel like I'm doing bingo when I'm doing these, you know, like Lotto. Hermit, King of Coins, Ten of Swords. I'm going to have some on top of each of these as well, and a couple of extras probably. Magician, the Sun, Six of Wands, the Star, Nine of Coins, Knight of Wands, Judgment, Ten of the Wheel of Fortune, Seven of Wands, and the World. I'm going to go, I don't know, just put one there, yes, and another one there. Right, and just a random one. Okay, so let's have a look. Right, so we've got, in the middle we've got the King of Swords, which is masculine energy, truthfulness as well, mastery, representing throat chakra as well, because it's all about communication, and the mind, also representing the mind. And on top of that, we've got Magician, which is number 1, which is also a masculine card, but about creativity and drive and ambition, they are saying. In fact, both those cards together are very representative of masculine energy and the drive that comes with a healthy masculine ego that's used to create, all right, and also with a lot of intuition and very direct and forthright. So we've got a lot of power coming in the centre of this reading following this full moon, a healthy masculine energy moving in, a drive to create, a drive to follow the intuition. Okay, and underlying that we've got Ten of Swords and we've got the Sun. So what's coming after this new moon portal, because they're all portals, is a release of what goes on in the mind, of any terrors and anxiety or tremors, any reluctance, they're saying. And this is all good. We've also got, like I said, there's been like a pause with the full moon, where we're held steady to do this work. So it's like we're not through it yet, basically. So the moon might be waning right now, but the work is still going on for, I don't know, maybe a week, something like 10 days, something like that, trailing off towards the end of the 10 days of where this work will be, the benefit of the work that we've done will be integrated into the masculine energy. Okay, because the work is always done by the feminine energy. Like I said, it's always about a point of bringing into harmony within yourself a state of going with the flow, following the heart, and that is a feminine energy. So the duality as well, right, that you've got with the Libra, in this case, right, not always, but in this case, with this full moon, if you're seeing the duality there as also masculine and feminine energy, the two energies, right, masculine dark, feminine is light. Feminine is higher and positive, and masculine is lower and darker. It's negative. So when you have like this wound coming up, the wound is saying to you, are you going to become me and allow yourself to go down in vibration and take on board or become more heavily masculine in your energetic representation in your human form, right? Or are you going to hold yourself, the mirror of the wound, hold it up to yourself and remain in your positive, highly creative, feminine state despite that wound showing up again in your life. Because this is a wound you know, this is not a wound you don't know. This is like the last wound. This is the big one, the final one, the one that remains when all the others are dealt with. Okay, so are you going to let it have the power over you, or are you going to master it? Are you going to take your power? Are you going to hold your power, basically, your feminine power? So we've got that going on as well. So it's a masculine feminine playoff as well, which is always dark and light. It's the same thing. So we've had that going on, right? So that's the work that you're presented with. Now, when the feminine does this work, the feminine energy does this work, when you do it inside yourself, and the people that will be watching this video will be feminine, predominantly energy, because they're the ones that are brought to the information. When you're asked to do this work within yourself, you're also doing it in terms of like masculine and feminine energy. So you're doing it for everything that's in existence in terms of masculine and feminine energy. So it really is not just work for you. It's not work on your wound. Like I said, the wound is only there to lead you to the soul advancement, right? And the soul advancement that you are incorporating as you face this wound is done for one and all, right? It's done for everything in existence, because you're taking your energy to a higher, you're maintaining your energy in a higher place, which is enabling everything to move energetically into a higher place. All right, so the work is not just for you. It's not a personal work necessarily. It is a work for everything in existence. So we've got that going on as well. And when you end this in yourself, you're ending it in others. I feel like I've digressed a bit. Basically, it's a still point, right? So it's like you're held and you're protected during this work as well. And that's another thing that's very different now to how it was like last year, even since before January, going a few years back, because like I say, these moons, everything that happens, were very chaotic. Because before you can reorganize the general energy like into a higher energy, there has to be chaos and confusion. And we've gone through all that chaos and confusion. These still points, this still point we're having now, is where you're held and you're allowed to do your work without the chaos and the confusion, basically. But it's still ending a process around the mind. It's ending the ego having control, basically, because it's the ego that has the hooks, that hooks you into the negative mindset that allows you to become all the questions about your very existence. All the questions of, why am I here? What's the point of living this life? All this kind of like, questions that come up that are ultimately like, you might not connect it in, but they're connected into the fact that you're ashamed and you're embarrassed to be in existence, because it's the wound that we're looking at is not really a wound that is personal to you at all. It's a wound of, it's a human wound, right? It's a wound of very existence itself. And it's a wound that stops people, it stops everything from attaining a higher energy, because it's a wound that hooks in and pulls people downwards. So healing that wound, basically, held in a still point, healing that wound. We've got that all in the middle here. And then what else have we got? Post-moon. Right, so we've got the wound coming in. We've got the wound coming in on the path, right? 6 of Wands. Ace of Swords, which is about communication. So it's also a very mental card, about how you talk to yourself in your head, about how you communicate with yourself, about how you allow yourself to communicate with yourself as well. Nothing comes in, right? No work comes in that we can't deal with. So before we even do this work with this moon, we know that we will have success, right? One way or another, it's going to be successful. It's never not going to be successful, because as we've gone through all the chaos moons and the crisis moons, and we're now in the stable, what's bringing in more stability is that we are ready for the work that comes in. That's also the protection that's here. We've got it twice. We've got the Sun and we've got the 7 of Wands. Protection around the transformation. We've got that 7 of Wands on the Death card there, right? And what's coming in on the road in the 6 of Wands is going to be dealt with, right? And it's going to be dealt with in a way that is beneficial, basically, with the Ace of Swords, because it's all just about how you allow yourself to be in relation to it. And we're ready for anything that comes in around that. Okay, so it's not that we're not able to. Because even, I can tell you now, even if there's people watching this, that when they were faced with that wound coming up at this moon, that did like do some purging or some crying or some like rolling around on the floor, you know, and all those kind of things, that then you recover and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Because there's a shame, you see, coming up again. But whenever you know, even those people that have done that will have had a little, their soul, which runs a script behind the mind, the ego, right? The ego is the one that's telling them to roll around on the floor because they're not worthy of being here and they should feel ashamed, or cry because everything's wrong and nothing's right, and, you know, therefore they should feel terrible about things. That's the mind that does that. Behind that is your soul, and your soul is running a script. And even the people that did that this time, and everybody's doing it less and less and less with every moon, but even the people that did it this time, the little part of the soul, well, not little part, but the soul that is behind the mind that is coming through will be saying to them, it's okay. It's okay that you did that, because even though you did that, you recognise that wound a little bit more than you did the last time it came up, and you saw it a little bit more for what it was this time it came up, and you saw it a little bit more from a soul perspective this time it came up than you did the last time. And when you see it from a soul perspective, what it is seeing it like from behind your eyes, and you see that it's not real. Okay, so you see that wound for exactly what it is. You see it for a hook that is trying to drag you down into a negative vibration, right? And you see it as not part of you anymore. Because every time you purge like that, whatever way you purge when these moons come up, whenever you purge that, what you're actually doing is you're fighting off dark energy, right? You're fighting a battle inside of yourself between the masculine and feminine, the dark and the light. And every time you fight, you win. There is no losing. All right, so you haven't got to worry about that either. It's just a process that you go through. It's a process of transformation, and you're protected, right? So every time you go through that, you're winning the battle. So it's not a necessary thing, you know, and it's not a thing to be ashamed of. It's just a thing that you have to go through to win the battle. But win the battle you will, and when you do, every time you win that battle, you come out with a little bit more understanding that the next time that wound comes up, you're not going to be like that, and you're not going to react like that because you don't want to, because you don't like the way it feels, and you're not having it anymore, and it's not going to win, basically, because it's the dark coming up to get you, right? And you're going to win because you are the light, because you're on a divine path, and you need to follow your heart, and you know that that's your path, following your heart, and you can't follow your heart if you're allowing the hooks to drag you down. You see, so this is why it's all happening, and this is why it's coming up, and this is what is effectively going on with you when it happens. And you are, like I say, always evolving through that, and always getting back into higher energy, and always, basically, you are winning the battle between the dark and the light inside yourself. And it's not you, all right? It just comes in through you because you're on a divine path. Because you're a portal for it. It's what you've come here for, it's what you've agreed to, and it's your work. Okay, so nothing to worry about, right? And everything's fine, and everything is as it should be, and everything is always going to get easier and easier and easier and easier and easier if you're on a divine path, okay? It will always get easier and easier and easier. It will never get harder and harder and harder. So what else have we got here? What else can I talk about? We've got the Queen of Cups, and we've got Judgment here. And this is following the heart, and this is destiny. Now, this is a really big change of subject, right? But there's another thing that I think I should talk about, and that is basically, you know, I'm reading these cards in the middle, and I'm talking about masculine energy. And I know, you know, that I've been here a lot of times in the past, and I've talked about masculine and feminine energy, and I've talked about twin flames and all that kind of stuff. Now, effectively, right, I have disenfranchised from the twin flame logo, for want of a better way of putting it, right? So there needs to be a rewording, because it's a hook now. Because what happened was, when I was brought into doing readings on YouTube, the the stage that I was at in this journey, right, this divine journey, was quite new. Like, basically, they showed me a few things. My guides showed me a few things. There was like some crazy coincidences, which aren't coincidences, you know, the synchronicities. There was uh, some new to me, like clairaudience and stuff that I'd never had, and clairsentience, which I'd always had, but even more of it. There was some outsider information, you know, from YouTube, and there's some psychic readings and all this kind of stuff, but it was all quite new to me. And the place that I came in at it, onto YouTube, when I was meant to come in, is all exactly it was meant to be, was to deliver readings to people and information to people, to also give them the knowledge of the path that they were on, right? And that was all fine, and everything was as it should be. Now, it gets to a point, right, that, how can I put it? The people that have been helped by being given that information, okay, through readings, personal readings, or through collective readings, have to evolve with me, right? They have to evolve beyond that point of understanding as well. So I'm being asked to basically evolve beyond that point myself. Now, in terms of like talking about twin flames, I would carry on doing that if the understanding around what twin flame was could be understood clearly from calling it twin flame. But because there's so much information out there, and a lot of it is not coming from people who are on this path, a lot of it is coming from karmic sources, a lot of it is just coming from well-meaning people, you know, people that aren't on this path, a lot of some coming from people that want to cash in on it. You know, there's a lot of different information coming in around those two words. And because of that, the words have become an aberration of what the true meaning is. So, and it's like saying, it's like if you were to call something, I think something like if you were going to call all fizzy drinks Coca-Cola, right? You can't do that because they're not all Coca-Cola. So what it does is it gives people a false impression of what something really is. See what I mean? So you simply can't use those words anymore if you're going to talk about what is a divine path, because everybody thinks when you say it that they know what it means, because there's all this other information out there that isn't what it is. All right, so it has to be called something else. It's got to be called divine path, because it's going to give people the insight that they now need into what is going on with them, and it's going to free them, and it's going to help them let go of what has become a bastardized aberration of what it was. All right, see what I mean? So, basically, we're going to talk about it in this way because it's going to help you let go, and it's going to allow you to move beyond your limitations and your restrictions that are keeping you stuck, that are allowing you to stay stuck, and that are keeping your energy low. Now, I've always said twin flame is not about romance, and it's not, okay? It's not romantic. Romance is karmic, okay? Romance is a karmic ideal. It's a lie, basically. It's never the truth, because romance involves you presenting a false image of yourself to someone else who presents a false image so that you can get together, and you go through a romance period, and then it falls apart, and then you find out who each other really is, and then you don't like each other at all, and then you get married anyway, and it's, you know, whatever. This is not what divine is. A divine path is when you are offered an insight into yourself by another person, and it's basically, if it's a relationship at all, it's a relationship that's held like this. So you never come like this, all right? So you're never that couple. You're never that couple in the romantic sense that, you know, everybody would like it to be. The idealized image. You're always like this with each other, right? Triggering. Triggering until what the triggering is asking you to do is open your heart to yourself. That's the divine path. It's opening your heart to yourself. Now, the other thing is, so that's really what twin flame is. Okay, now it's called twin flame. They call it twin flame, right? But it's not even two; it's three, because it's the two people, and it's God, if you want to call it God, or love. Basically, God is love. That's why they say God is love, because it's just love, right? We're talking about love. We're not talking about romantic love, and we're not talking about we're just talking about unconditional, pure, heart-centered love, which is the same energy as freedom, the same energy as basically the I am presence, the same energy as, it's like an energy of nothing, clarity, right? Clarity, freedom, that's what that is. So it's a trinity, right? The twin flame is actually a trinity. It's three, not two. So it's never this. You're always going to be like this because there's another one on top. The divine path, like I say, is about you opening up to your heart, and the other energy will prompt that trigger with that triggering. You will both prompt each other actually with the triggering. Now, in sense of like, I've done a lot of readings, right? And I know from my own existence, okay, that the other person, right, is somebody who you will reconnect with, right? There is a reconnection that takes place with this person in human form, in the current existence, the current lifetime. However, when you're looking at that reconnection that happens, right, what you're looking at there is a destined event. So it's tied in with the divine path, but it is not a karmic event. Okay, so it's not like with a karmic event, when you read that energy, you know when that's going to be, because it's not reliant on a divine path. You see, a divine path is opening up to the heart, and when you open up to the heart, there is no restriction and there is no limitation. Therefore, it's like opening everything up completely. So it means that anything can happen at any time because it's no limitations, right? Karmic events are things that are like pinpointed, do. That's going to happen on the 2nd of November 1953. That's going to happen, da. You know, it's like shooting of President Kennedy. It's like the shooting of Martin Luther King. It's all those kinds of things, right, that are destined in that sense because they're going to kick something off. But when you're on the path of the heart, which is your divine path, your destined event is reliant on how much you follow your heart and how much you open up to following your heart. And that's where your destined event is there, okay? And that's why it appears like the goalposts are moving all the time, because your destined event is your destined event, but you're meeting yourself, basically. That destined event is when you meet you, when you've fully opened your heart, and when you're fully moving beyond the limitations of the false reality that we live in, which is a fear matrix, okay? So we've got these cards here, Queen of Cups and the Judgment. You're rolling with the flow, opening up to your heart, following your heart, and there is your destined event. Now, every time we go through one of these portals, like this moon that we've just been through, which is asking you to face your wound and move beyond it, and not become that wound, right? And stay in tune with your heart, which is your feminine essence, and stay in balance and serenity and calm and equilibrium around that wound coming up, right? Which is when you are not going to become that wound, is exactly how you will be around it. You can look at it, you can walk around it, you can look at it from all angles. You could turn it upside down, look on the bottom of it, see if it was made in China. You could do anything you want with that wound, but you will not become it, right? You could even get it and shake it up and down like one of those snowstorm things and put it back down on the side, but you still would not become it. So when you're faced with a wound that comes up around the moon, and that's what you do with it, you've mastered it. Okay? And this means that you're then able to move with the heart, because what you can do when you put down the snowstorm, right, is that then you can like skip off into the other room with your music playing and dance around and have fun again and live from your heart. Okay? And as soon as you master that wound, that final wound, it means that you can move forward in your life and you can operate from an existence that is beyond all negativity, all restriction that is placed there in front of you by the masculine energy in the world, right? In the energy that we live in the matrix that we live in, because all negativity is masculine, right? It's all restriction. It's all no, you can't, no, you shouldn't, no, you'd better not, you're not good enough, you'll never be able to do that, you need a job, you need a house, you need a mortgage, you better have some money in the bank because you might not, you know, what you're going to do when you're old. It's all those things. It's all fear driven. It's all negativity, right? And it's all designed to hold you back from following your heart. So when you're faced with a wound that comes up with the moon and you're asked to not become it, it means you can move beyond it. It means that you can then run free, basically. And you can live completely from the heart. And when you do that and you start rolling forward and you're doing that, and that doesn't mean that life necessarily gets easier, because the more you get in tune with rolling with the heart and moving from the heart, it just means that things will still come in, but there'll be lessons in like, how are you going to deal with this now? How are you going to deal with this now from the heart? So something could still come in that's like, of a negative value, but it means that you'll operate in a different way in response to it, right? Because you're not going to get sucked down by it and dragged into it. You're just going to be like, oh, hey, okay, well, let's deal with it this way, and then you remain in your higher energy, basically. And the more you do that, and the more in tune you are with doing that, the more you are rolling towards meeting your destiny. And if you want to call a twin flame anything that it really should be called, to take away any of the preconceived ideas about it being a romantic meeting with somebody else that is going to happen at a certain on a certain day, or is going to be like that because everybody wants it like that, right? When it's like that, is to call it a destined event. So what was your twin formerly known as the artist formerly known as twin flame is now a destined event, okay? And that destined event will come in when you are fully embodying your heart and not before time. So that's the wisdom, you see. You've got opposite that, you've got the wisdom in the hermit, and you've got the wheel of fortune, which is timing, destined event. You can see there, you've got going with the flow, Queen of Cups, and judgment, which is destined event, and the wisdom around the destined event. We've talked a lot about completion in the past. The completion is when you are fully operating from your heart, completely operating from your heart. Now, this means you've got all the hooks out of you, okay? You're hooked by many, many things. Like I say, a lot of things that stop you rolling with the heart. A lot of things are like worry about false security. I've said it many, many times before. I just reiterate, we are living in a false matrix. The things you see, feel, touch are not real. They are merely a manifestation of energy, okay? Your job, your home, they're not real. They're just an illusion. So it doesn't matter if you give up your job. It doesn't matter if you give up your home. Your money in the bank, it's an illusion. Your pension, it's an illusion. It doesn't matter if you say, if you you know, go out, spend it all on shoes one day. The shoes are merely an illusion. It's all this is an illusion, right? Now, some of these things in the Matrix can be great because some of them are multicolored and spin around and give you a lot of pleasure and that kind of stuff, you know, or they feel really nice, like fun fur, or you know, they smell nice like flowers and that kind of stuff, and that's all good. But to like go into to like live a small life because you're scared, because you're living in, you know, you're believing in lack, a sense of lack, is only going to bring more lack, right? It's only going to bring less. If you set yourself free of the fear of poverty, you will be rich, and it's as simple as that. Now, this kind of this modus operandus is what's been asked, okay, of us. This is going with the heart, because you can't lead a truly spiritual life, right, which is operating from the heart. That's all it is. That's what spiritual life is. It's operating from the heart. It's operating from a sense of freedom and a sense of trust. Trust that you will be provided for by your guides if you let go of everything that you think is security. Because how can you be leading a spiritual life, a truly spiritual life, if you think your security is coming from a false matrix? If you think your security is coming from the job you have, or the house you have, or the pension in the bank, or the stocks of the shares, or the car outside, right? Because you're saying one thing, you're walking the walk, you're talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk. A truly spiritual life is trusting that none of those things are security, and that the only security is going to come when you let go. Because the other thing on the divine love path is letting go. Because your destined event, you have two things on this path. Duality, right? Masculine and feminine energy. You have your divine path, which is moving with your heart, and you have your destined event. So let's call it that as well. Let's call the feminine the divine path, and the masculine the destined event. So if you want this, then you're going to need to move with the heart and let go of the fear and let go of the false reality that you think gives you the security. And then you'll meet your destined event, and then you will go like this. But as long as you're living in fear and you've got one foot in a sense of spirituality, and even with that, you've got the aberrated, bastardized, wrong version of it, and you've got the other foot in the false matrix. So say you're like hanging on with a job and you're calling yourself a twin flame, and then you're saying, when will I be with this person? Well, let go of calling yourself a twin flame and let go of your, whatever it is you're hanging on to, false reality, right? And move with the flow. You see how I did that? And you're free. You're moving. You're upwards. You're no longer rooted in a false reality, under a false precept. Is that even a word? That you're a twin flame, and that twin flame means you should be like that. You have to let all that go. Because once it's going with the flow in a feminine way, then it can meet its destiny. It's an energetic thing, right? It meets its destiny when it goes with the flow. So, where was I? So that's an important thing to know, right? That going with the flow will allow you to meet your destiny. And, you know, who was the artist formerly known as Twin Flame should now really just be known as Destined Event, because it's, you know, it is destined. And the other part of the fear, of course, is that when this doesn't happen straight away, or when it's not forthcoming, when it's wanted, is that people then start to question. And what they question is, they say, am I a twin flame? Right? Maybe I was wrong because I'm not like this with this person. So that would mean I'm not. Whereas in fact, if you're like this, then that's a clear sign that you are, actually, because what you're being asked to do constantly is clear your own energy until you become your own heart, right? So of course you're not going to be like that with somebody else, because where is the finding yourself and becoming your own heart in that? It isn't. It's a process that happens individually on your own, not like this. What was I going to say about that? I was going to say something else. Because when people question it as well, the other thing they do is they question what's going on with that other person, right? That they think is, they call it their twin flame, and they think that means that they should be like that with them. And they're like, well, this is going on with them, and that's going on with them, and they're having a baby, or they got married, or whatever. Which is really neither here nor there, because it's not about that. That's whatever they're doing there has got its own timing, its own timeline. It's got to be done, right? It's got nothing to do with whether you're a twin flame or not. I'm not calling it that. It's got nothing to do with whether you're on a divine path or not, all right? If you're on a divine path, like I say, your job, your reason for existing is to come into operating completely from your heart. Got nothing to do with being with that person. So it doesn't really matter what they're doing in their life or where they're at. It's got nothing to do with that. If it all goes quiet for a while and they do exit and they go off and have kids with something, that means that it's saying to you, now's your time to start moving and flowing with your heart. Where can you do that? How can you open up to that? How can you become that? Because you have to be that, because that's what you're here for. It's you, them, and God, which is love. It's not just you and them. So change it, right? Stop it being about that other person, whether they're your twin flame or not, and make it about you and whether you're following your divine path and whether you're opening up to your heart. And then you'll be in the right energy. You'll be doing the right. You'll be operating more optimally from your soul, from a soul level perspective. Okay, rather than focusing on the other one and seeing some kind of lack and seeing something being wrong because you're not together, because nothing's wrong there. It's meant to be. Whatever is meant to be. What would be, and wrong is probably not the best word to use, but what would be a better energy to be in is operating from your heart in your life in whatever way you can and moving with the flow, right? And gaining more wisdom from that. And there you comes your completion. So I think that's answered that question. I don't know. I think I might have left a little loophole, but we'll come back to it if I have. Right, so here we've got 9 of coins, and that is the feminine energy when it's in completion as well. And it's also the feminine energy when it's in its state of abundance. Now we've got 5 of Wands, and we've got change on the 5 of Wands is all about change and really shaking up the energy, really. And momentum is what is still kind of on the cards, even though we've had a brief pause to look at the wound again. We've still got momentum. It's going to start, well, it has started building, but it's going to get faster and faster again through to the next new moon, which I've got written down somewhere actually. That's on the, I can't see it right now. It must be on the other calendar. It's coming, don't worry. So, feminine energy in abundance. Abundance, this came up in a reading for someone the other day, and it's something I've always known about abundance, but it's not something I'd ever spoken about before. But it's something that is, it needs to be understood really what abundance is, because there's another spiritual aberration really. And I think, when I started tuning in, I had someone coincidentally gave me that video, The Secret, and I used to watch that all the time and listen to it, and I thought it was brilliant. I still do actually. And I remember then though, they used to repeatedly talk about abundance and create, an abundance coming, and they were kind of right in that, but they just didn't explain it properly. So from there, a lot of people tapped into that and they started to talk about it, and they got the wrong end of the stick about it, and it's become a cause for complaint amongst my guides that people talk about it in the way they do, because it's like abundance is not finances and it's not wealth. because those things will come if you let go. All right, your guides will provide for you whatever you need if you're on a divine path. That's is one of the benefits of it that you don't have on a karmic path. So it's not like without its benefits to be on this. What can be perceived as a benefit and what can be perceived as a bit easier than a karmic life, because it means that if you let go and set yourself free of the matrix and all its constraints and worrying about a pension and worrying about a mortgage and worrying about this and that, what you need will be provided for. But you're not going to get that without the trust in the fact that it will be. And you see, the abundance that you get is the freedom, and the abundance that you get is the clarity, and the abundance that you get is the clearness, right? Clarity as in clearness, as in not being encumbered by the matrix anymore. So it has to be let go of. All the worry has to be let go of. The greed, they're saying, and I don't think it's really, it's not like it's not ultimate greed, but it's penultimate greed. A lot of the spirituality that's out there, or so-called spirituality, is about you do this spiritual degree and you get this spiritual qualification and you go and work as a spiritual guide. And there's people doing that and they're not functioning and they're not thriving. And the reason that they're not thriving from it is because they're going into it with a money head on, and they're thinking, well, I'll get this qualification and I'll become a spiritual teacher and then I'll make money from it. But this is not how you're provided for if you're on a divine path. You don't need the qualifications, and you don't need anybody else to be your teacher and give you a piece of paper saying that you're allowed to do angel readings or you're allowed to do anything like that. Because if you've got the gifts, you've got the gifts, and most people who are on a divine path have got the gifts. They're innate. They're within you. They just need to be opened up to, and you open up to them by following your heart and going with the flow. And that's when your guides will bring them in. And they'll give them to you and they'll say, hey, here you are. Here's a voice in your head. Now you're clairaudient. Now you can do readings for people. Or they'll say, have you noticed that when you're around people, people feel better? So you're a natural healer. Or have you noticed when you do gardening that the plants grow because you're a natural, you're a natural healer for plants and all this kind of stuff. And the abundance that's offered to you is a release. It's a form of release. Clarity is release. It's no longer having to be hooked by the matrix into a state of fear and believe that you need to create abundance through creating physical wealth in terms of money, because that is not what they mean by abundance. They mean the promised land, and the promised land is freedom, right? So that all needs to change, basically, in terms of how you view the spirituality business, basically. And, go on a road trip instead or something. If it's not working out for you because you bought a package and it told you by the end of it you'd be earning money as a spiritual advisor, then just jack it all in and go on a road trip and find yourself again and find your heart. Truly find your heart, and you will find abundance. So we've got that coming in there as well. We've got Six of Swords down here and we've got Knight of Wands. So get release. Six of Swords is letting things go. Knight of Wands is fast moving energy. I mean, really, the more you can let go of right now at the end of this moon, the more you're going to get into that fast moving energy. This is like a weather report, isn't it? But it is, because the fast moving, the momentum's building again. As soon as we're out of this moon, within 7 to 10 days, it's going again. And the more that can be let go of in terms of anything you don't need on your, out of your backpack, then the better off you're going to be. And this is like all your worries and all your shame and all your blame and all your guilt and all your stress and all your encumberment and all your, what you feel is your financial restriction, which is just an illusion, because the money in the bank is an illusion. And, get on the road. The Eight of Wands, the random card that we got out, that's all about fast moving energy. Move with the flow, go with whatever comes into your life and see it. It's the way you see that wound that came in. See it in the same way. This event that's happening in my life is not me. This event is just transitory. This event is just an event that I need to learn around, that I need to grow around, that I need to evolve around, that I need to address from a soul perspective and not from an earthly perspective. You've got a leak in the roof and there's water coming in. This is not for me to start worrying about how I'm going to pay for that leak. This is for me to find more trust around and to say, hey ho, that's meant to show me something. And also water's about emotions. And maybe that's telling me that, what I've released at the moon is coming through the roof because I've released a lot of emotion. You bring everything in yourself as well, It's telling you to like take note. You're emotional or something like that when things like that happen. Or maybe you've got a contract with that building and that building is healing because it's around you and the building is crying, because that can happen as well, that kind of thing, And I know that's completely random, but there you go. So the devil, we've got energy working together, and then we've got the road as well, more freedom, and we've got the Queen of Wands, which is power of the feminine. And that's all coming in. So, it's all more power to the feminine, really. Whatever it is that we go through at the full moon that asks us to face it, we become stronger around. As the more we tame the lion that is in the room, the more that we are in control of our self in relation to our wound, the more we have mastered our wound. And the control is, it's knowing it's there, but it's not getting hooked by it. It's not avoiding it and going in a corner and pretending it doesn't exist. The mastering is knowing exactly what it is and seeing it exactly for what it is and calling it a hook and not letting it hook you. Right? I am not me and it is not me. I am not it, sorry, and it is not me. And then what have we got at the end? King of Coins, which is a physical manifestation of a man. Eight of Cups, which is the return, walking back to something that was left behind. And the Star, which is all about healing. So, ultimately, what we have here is a healing of masculine and feminine energy, a healing that has to take place within the feminine only, until the feminine is moving with a flow, which of course the Eight of Cups is going back to the heart, it's going back to your own heart. Got 2 eights there, so they want you to know it's about going back to your own heart. And with going back to your heart, you see, you have to release whoever it was that you thought was your twin flame, because those words are no longer relevant, because they've become irrelevant because of how often they've been used and how they've been turned into something that they're not. You're on a divine path. You're on a path of coming back to yourself and coming back to, not just coming back to your heart, but opening up from your heart and blazing a trail through your heart by operating from a state of no limits from the heart, right? And don't worry about it, because when it's ready, it will happen. It will happen to you, so don't resist it. You haven't got to what people on divine path, the first thing they do about everything is worry. They worry about everything because they're sensitive. They worry about, if they're on a divine path, they worry about that. Or if they're wrong about it, it's like, that's what I was going to say earlier, that's a loophole. People who come to me who've got this, am I still a twin flame? This is why we're not using the words anymore, because there is no such question, right? Because if you're on a divine path, it's the reason you've incarnated, okay? And you'll know it because you're sensitive, and because you're not greedy, and because you're not vindictive, and because you're not jealous, and because you're not hateful, and because you just want the best for everything around you and everyone around you. And maybe you talk to trees, and maybe you talk to animals, and maybe you'd rather be like sitting in the grass talking to the flowers than like working in a bank. Or this is how you know, right, that you're on a divine path. And because you're not with someone, because there's only one person for you, and one person has your heart, and that's the heart you want, and it's your heart, right? And you know that, and you feel it, and you feel your way through life, and everything is about feelings, right? And at first it's about being overwhelmed by your feelings and being controlled by your feelings. And as you move through conquering the heart and becoming the heart, it's about mastering your feelings, because the feelings are the most human state closest to God, and that's the path you're on. It's a divine path. Do you see how it rolls, how it flows? So there is no question around another person of, am I a twin flame? There is only an answer, are you on a divine path or not? And then you can close off to yourself all the unnecessary worry and questioning that is doing nothing but taking you out of your godly, creative state, right? Where you will find abundance, and abundance in a sense of it's not about looking at the bank and seeing what's in there, because they will show you it's not that. And if you think it's that, they will show you it's not, right? This is going to be about you not even looking at it, and then you'll look at it the next day and you'll be like, oh, it's got the same amount of money as it had like 2 years ago, and it's like, or maybe even a little bit more, and I don't know how that got there. You'll get sudden windfalls, you'll get sudden rebates, you'll get sudden all sorts of things coming at you. So don't worry about it. What else was I going to say? Creator state. That's a very, very significant, because that's this central cards is creator state for the masculine energy. The King of Swords, the Sword of Truth, and the Magician. So this is all mind power, which is the masculine state is a mental state. It's the ego. So it's all mind based. But with these two cards, you see, we have clarity and we have beyond logic. What lies beyond logic is intuition, which is what the Magician is. But the King of Swords is master of the mind. So those two cards combined are a very, very heady and potent mix. And underneath that we have the Sun and the protection and the ending, which is in the Ten of Swords. And down here we've got the King of Coins, which is of course masculine energy manifest in that's like a person basically. So anything else to say? Anything else? Did I say your completion is when you're fully in your heart? That's your completion. It's an internal state. It's where you don't flux anymore. Your vibration doesn't go up and down, in and out because of external events. So that's a sign of it. It also means you carry on going forward when you would normally perhaps hold back. That's a sign of going with embodying the heart fully and going with the flow, because there's so much trust involved in going forward when really all you want to do is hold back. Despite all external circumstances, like if things externally aren't going right, but you carry on moving forward despite that and face those events, because every time you do that, you're allowing your heart to take the lead, because you're trusting things will be all right. So I think I said that. In terms of the other, your destined event, which would be a reconnection with another person who's involved in your process, your divine process, you have to let go completely of whatever you think that was and whatever you think it should be. And I know it's very, very funny, isn't it, that they bring us in and they tell us it's one thing, and but there literally is an entry point, right? Like I said, there's an entry point where you're guided to understand that you've got a specific reason for being here that's not a karmic one. It's all about love. So they have to get you in somehow to understand that. But then it's really about, once you've had that first initial understanding, letting go of everything around it. Because it's like if you drew a pie chart. I love this analogy. If you drew a pie chart of what is a divine path, right, a divine love path, you would have maybe -1% as that connection with that other person, right? -1%, and the rest is all the work that you have to do on yourself and on becoming love, because that's basically what the divine path is. You're becoming love. That's not that's like, this does not happen overnight. Becoming love, complete love, incarnate. That's not that would not happen overnight, because there's a lot of work involved. We've got all those wounds that have been dealt with. You've got all the wounds. You've got the one, ultimate wound. I don't know what we call that. It's like the God wound or the Jesus wound or something like that, because it's it's your reason for existence wound, your right to exist wound. Right, that's the big one. Once you detach from that wound, you detach from the matrix, because you no longer feel any responsibility to the fear. It's huge. It's a huge hook. And hopefully it's gone for a lot of people with this moon. And then, you've got all that work, right? I mean, that hook alone, that wound hook, if you're looking at it on a pie chart, well, that'd be more than 5%, I reckon. 7% maybe. So that's more than that connection with that other person. That's more than that physical connection. That's what I mean, the physical connection. Right, a lot more. Working on that, getting that hook out. So do you see how it is? It isn't what you think. So right at the end of this journey that you're on, after the final hook, and your right to exist, has been reprogrammed by de-hooking yourself from that final hook, you're pretty much your soul essence in human form, because you've got no barrier to moving with the heart, to operating completely from the heart with absolute trust. And it means as well that you will never ever see yourself ever again as being insignificant, or your life as being insignificant, because it means you know and understand why you're here, and you are actively engaging with the prophecy, right? Which is the prophecy being the reason you're here, to follow the heart. So you're living your own prophecy. Do you see what I mean? And once you're engaging with yourself from beyond your human persona, from beyond whoever you are or you've always seen yourself as, and you're operating with yourself truly, entwined with your soul as one, as an I am presence, and you're in a state of freedom, and you're rooted in security through your chakras rather than through your finances, there's no limits. And and what goes right in one goes right in the other, How it becomes in one becomes in the other. So your divine connection, it basically supersedes the self as well. They supersede their human persona, and they become as one with their soul, which is what it's all about. So you're both liberated and you're both free. That's why it has to be like that and not like that, because there's no liberation or freedom in that, right? That's why you're like that with them. And I'm sure there was something else. We just pull one more card and see what they say. Oh, that's what I was going to say, of course. I left you hanging there, didn't I? When you unhook that final wound, and you unhook anything that's limiting your expansiveness, which includes the twin flame, what has become a concept, because everybody's conceptualizing it from a logical perspective, and it can't be conceptualized from a logical perspective. It narrows it down and it denigrates it. Okay, it takes it away from what it truly is, by trying to analyze it, discuss it, intellectualize it. It's all out there, right? All this kind of stuff goes on around it. It's this, it's that, it's this. This is going to happen, that's going to happen. You know, and all these readings where they talk about masculine and feminine as though they're two people. So that's also leading people down this path of thinking, well, that's another person that's coming back to me. So it's become a hook, right? It's become a hook, and it's got to be released. So release yourself from the words. Anything basically that you find a question around, that can't be allowing you to be free of your mind, then needs to be let go of. All the questions come from the mind. The mind is where the ego resides. The ego is where you have certain expectations of how you think things should be, and if they're not that way, then things are wrong. The heart operates from a place where nothing is ever wrong or right, it just is. Where you are not Bob or Sue or Rita too, you are just your I am presence. So you have no earthly persona. Because love is beyond your earthly persona, right? So love is letting go of everything. So you've got to let go of everything that you think everything was or should have been, and all your expectations around everything. And with that, you let go of everything that you think is right or wrong, or everything that is not delivering, from a place in your mind where you have all the ideas that have built up and all the hooks that are in you, and they're all let go of. And once you let go of and you're free, then you're free to meet your destiny and your destined event, but not until you're free of everything. Six of Wands, success. The Fool, a new journey. And Page of Swords, which is messages. What's another one on that? And Knight of Coins, which is healing. You see, every time you free yourself of your mind and what goes on in your mind and all the questions and all the worries and all the stress, and you simply have to let go to stop that. You don't need an answer from someone, because ultimately the ultimate letting go is when you no longer want to know anything. right? So the people that come to me for readings to say, oh, I want to know what's going on because I'm not sure if I'm to inflame anymore. Yeah, you need to let go of that because it's not even relevant anymore. Because you've already, by asking the question, you're misunderstanding what it originally was in the first place because you've been hooked in by what it falsely has been represented as. Do you get it? Because you're thinking it's a thing and it's not a thing, it's a freedom. It's an evolution. It's an evolution of a state of being. It's your I am presence. It's God. So that's that really. I think we'll just leave it at that. So, and it's a complete balancing of the masculine and feminine within you, which brings you to a state of completion. I'm talking in circles, aren't I? And that's that. All right, lots of love. Stay well. Don't get sucked in by the fear or this false spiritual matrix. Okay, bye.